Man, speaking of like comics and like style and whatnot, dude, you like Tony McMillen making the dopest looking indie comics and your style, it reminds me a lot, especially with this move I'm doing and going through all my books and I'm looking at all these creators and style is one of the biggest things as an artist especially, and you're like a Jack Kirby of comics, the way you've kind of reconstructed figures and like put them together with, and we'll talk about the pins you use and everything, but where did this sense of style come from? What inspired you to get that going? Because that's what got my attention when I saw you.
Oh, thank you very much. I don't know. I guess I love Jack Kirby, but I like a lot of different artists, and I was always drawn to really distinct styles. And of comic books, especially as a kid, exaggerated superheroes and kind of dynamic posing, like Frank Miller's posing is something I always was like drawn to. He'd always draw, even if some of his line work it can be ugly, I think in a good way. The
Hmm.
figures, they're posed so heroically or so just dramatically, and I really was drawn to that. And then as I got a little older, I be into like Eric Larson, and then I got into like Frank Miller, or sorry, Jack Kirby through that. And Jack Kirby was the king of these poses, like just the foreshortening, the everything was just cranked to 11, and I really really was drawn to that. And I think it's continued, even quieter art. I'm like, it'd be like Sam Keith can have some quiet moments, and like the Max people are just talking, but there's always something really cool and weird about the way they're crouched or their heads down just in a certain way. It all looks really like thoughtful, or at least there's some choices being made. He isn't just dashing it off. And like, if you're going to draw somebody jumping over like a building, make it the coolest way you could do that. And I think that's what I respond to, so I try to do that.
Man, yeah, that's so great because yeah, dramatic. That's what it is. I love that. Like using that term for this, like dramatic posing. And it's not violent, but it's full of action. And that's what's cool about it.
Yeah, and I think exactly there's a big difference there. And I can do violent stuff too. I enjoy that, but action is its own thing.
Yeah,
You can draw someone reaching for their keys in a really exciting way,
yeah.
and I think unless it detracts from the story you're telling, you might as well make it interesting or cool. Like movie wise, I love when you can feel the camera's presence. Like I love early Sam Raimi, like Evil Dead 2,
Mm.
or even like the Coen brothers also in like Raising Arizona, where the camera's just moving around and flying around. So everything's heightened and weird, and I love that. So most of my stuff, I think I'm trying to do something like that, where I'm just kind of like I want people to pay attention to the way I am showing them these events and people.
How do you start your process with all this? Like, where do you go to start figuring out, do you start from front to back, like when you're doing your layouts and like trying to construct to build the background? Like, where do you start when you start working on a page or a piece?
So I actually think for me, my process, the less I labor over something, it usually is the better. Usually my first impulse is mostly the right one. So I'll do very, very loose thumbnails on a piece of typing paper. Just they're just like the layout, like, okay, this arrangement of rectangles and boxes and stick figures seems good. And then I'll do really, really loose pencils and a blue pencil on the paper. And I try not to if I can get away with it, not too many facial expressions or anything else like that, because I think overthinking it, the line gets kind of dull, and so the inking is really where I'm drawing. So um, I think for most of my stuff, that's where I do most of the actual work. And a lot of times I'm improvising with the page, and so I draw in a very loose style, and so sometimes things happen which I was not planning for, there, i.e., mistakes, and I try to roll with it as best I can, and sometimes great things happen. I did a page of my book Serious Creatures, and it's supposed to be a cool skull image with the main character Bobby's glasses, and I screwed up. It just looked terrible, and I was actually really I don't really get like this. I got frustrated, and so I scribbled over, I scratched over really hardcore with my pen, and ink was splattered everywhere, and all of a sudden I did something. I was like, wait, I get this. Actually, I can make this work now. I can salvage this. I added some white out, and it just kept on throwing things on top of it. All of a sudden, I was like, oh, this is great. This is better than what I was gonna do originally. And that was a great, that was a great instance of this process working. Sometimes I just screw up and I go, oh, I gotta start again. But I think for the most part, I'm good at walking a tightrope, and just it's like I play music. It's when you're jamming with somebody, there might be it's only a bad note if the next note you do doesn't sound good. If someone does something weird, you play with it. It just might be, oh, cool. We're doing this now. We're moving left, not moving right. If you can roll with it, all of a sudden you and the audience might not even know any better. It's like, oh, this sounds awesome. I love how they twisted it around. They curved it.
That's awesome, dude. Talk about like happy accidents kind of like shaping your artwork and really just running with the passion that comes out of that, you know? I mean, that page just sounds like it was frustrating. It captivated you. You just like tired of it, but out of your like literally Vader out of his, coming up out of it, like his passion, you destroyed it and you created this beautiful thing out of it and it made it better. That's insane. That's cool as hell.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's one of my favorite instances, and it happens once in a while, stuff like that. But one of the things I think that helps me with this sort of thing is like when I draw a comic book page, I do use a pencil. I pencil in some the rough layouts. But when I draw, usually I just draw straight to ink, and I've been doing this for
Yeah.
years, and so that's really honed my ability to kind of improvise and play and roll with things. And so a lot of times I use a Pilot parallel pen, which is a chisel tip. It's flat, and one of the things I love about it is I can make a mark, and I don't know what I'm doing yet. I'm just making a big mark, a big smudge, and I'll look at it and go, what does that look like? And a lot of times I go, oh, it looks like parts of a face or parts of a finger or parts of a figure, or even sometimes like a tree or a house. And then I'll just try to kind of chisel out the rest of it. But the initial inspiration is just an accident. I'm just kind of, it's like, I don't want to belabor the musical metaphor, but it's just hitting a guitar, and the first thing you hit, go, what is that chord? Oh, that's cool. And then what does that inspire? What's the next thing you play? And
Mhm.
so that keeps it fun and playful. And I think that I think usually you can tell if an artist is having fun on a page. Like and that's that the mileage may vary in people, but I really respond to that. I respond to that in most art where it's like, oh, they're having a gas. That's cool. And I try to do that with my stuff. And don't be wrong, like there's definitely times where it's usually the thing I think it's gonna be really easy, like a pose. I'm like, oh, I got this. I've done this before, and it's like, no, this is gonna be attempt 15. Please, please, I just want to get done with this drawing. And that happens sometimes, um, but it's funny. Usually, like if I'm doing what I think I should be doing, the first attempt, the first thing I want to do is usually the way to go with it.
That's so cool. It's kind of like when you're staring out to like a wall or like, those popcorn ceilings and you start seeing images. That's what it reminds me of. You're just like, you're just seeing, staring into the clouds and letting your imagination just run wild.
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned that because there's a page in my book series Creatures where the character is literally doing that, and the word for it is called pareidolia. And he's literally looking at the popcorn ceilings. There's different kinds, and one's called California Knockdown. And the book is a lot about California. I was like, oh, it's a great name. And I used to live in Arizona, so we had those kind of ceilings in all of my apartments.
Mhm.
And he's literally looking at faces, and I had to figure out a way to draw that, which was hard for me. So I figured out smudging white out and a bunch of weird smudges, and eventually it looked kind of like that when I put it in the page. But I do that all the time. Like in the bathroom, I look at the floor, the ceiling, nonstop. I look at trees. I always see gnarled, weird faces, and sometimes I'll try to actually recreate those on page. But I think that's superhuman. I think that like people explain it, and I'll buy it. That people they go, oh, as a human, you try to recognize human faces or any sort of face because in ancient times we want to make sure we're not going to be eaten or someone's going to try to attack us, and that's why when we look at a car, we think the lights look kind of like eyes and the grill looks like a mouth, and I
Yep.
either if that's even if that's not true, I'll buy that. That's why we're doing it. But I'm trying to use that for my advantage, and I think that's really fun. So basically, that's what I'm doing. I make a few smudges, and I look at it like it's popcorn ceiling, and I'll go, what do I see? And then I try to make the rest of it.
Oh, man, that's cool. And I mean, talk about like, we always talk about music on the show and how I grew up as a musician and I studied music forever. And there's that awesome Victor Wooten quote where he's saying something like, you're only one wrong note, or only, yeah, only one note away from the right note. And that's just like,
Right.
if you make a mistake, all you have to do is just one step forward and you're in the right spot. And it sounds like that's the way your art is that it starts with the right note and it could go into something funky where you're figuring out, but then you find the click and that click by not stopping yourself and being like, this is trash, like I don't know what I'm doing, you're pushing past that wrong note and prevailing through it, which a lot of people get stuck at. They get stuck at the wrong note and are just like, this is bad, this is wrong, I can't do this. And you go push yourself past that and experiment more and let those wrong notes kind of create your art, which is, mesmerizing.